October 17, 1959, Havana Province, Cuba. Colonel Marcos Rodriguez held the rope while his CIA handler kicked the chair from beneath Ramon Castro's feet, the older Castro brother. Fidel's mentor, the one who taught revolution before revolution, had a name. Marcos was 24, fresh out of Langley. This was supposed to be his first kill for God and country. What Marcos didn't know was that the man swinging from that Cuban ceiba tree wasn't Ramon Castro. The real Ramon had vanished into the night, taking with him every secret the CIA thought they'd buried in Cuban soil. For 63 years, Marcos believed he'd helped kill a revolutionary. Tonight, sitting in his Miami office with a manila envelope and a photograph of a very much alive Ramon Castro walking through Coral Gables, Marcos finally understood the truth. The CIA hadn't killed Fidel Castro's brother. They'd created their most dangerous enemy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The photograph trembled in Marcos's weathered hands. Ramon Castro, older, silver-haired but unmistakably alive, stood outside Coral Gables City Hall, shaking hands with Miami-Dade County Commissioner Janet Morales. The timestamp read 3 days ago. Marcos set the photo down and reached for the bottle of Havana Club rum he kept locked in his desk drawer. His fingers found only empty air. Elena had thrown it out last month during one of her visits, lecturing him about drinking alone at 62. His daughter had inherited her mother's sharp tongue and her grandfather's stubborn streak, traits that made her a formidable investigative journalist and an insufferable child. The manila envelope had arrived by courier 20 minutes ago. No return address. Inside, the photograph, a USB drive, and a single sheet of paper with an address in Coconut Grove and a time. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Nothing else. Marcos stood and walked to his office window, gazing down at Calle Ocho. Even at 11 p.m., Little Havana pulsed with life. Elderly men played dominoes under the streetlights while their wives gossiped on plastic chairs dragged from apartments. The smell of Café Cubano and cigarette smoke drifted through his cracked window. For 15 years, Rodriguez Security Solutions had been his penance. Background checks for law firms, corporate surveillance, the occasional cheating spouse case. Boring work that kept him busy and his past buried. The kind of cases that didn't require him to remember the weight of rope in his hands or the sound of a chair scraping across Cuban dirt. His secure phone buzzed. Unknown number. Rodriguez. Hello, Marcos? The voice carried a slight Cuban accent, refined by decades of exile. I trust you received my package. Marcos's blood chilled. He knew that voice. Older now, weathered by time. But he'd heard it pleading in Spanish as they dragged him from a safe house 63 years ago. Ramon Castro is dead, Marcos said quietly. The man you helped lynch was named Miguel Herrera, a baker from Santiago de Cuba. Wrong place, wrong revolution, wrong Castro brother. Ramon's laugh held no warmth. The CIA grabbed him during a raid on a safe house. They needed a body for their operation. Any body would do. Marcos closed his eyes. Miguel Herrera. He'd never known the baker's name. You're lying. Father Domingo Ruiz died in Jackson Memorial Hospital this morning. Lung cancer. Before he passed, he gave me something. A confession tape he'd been carrying for 6 decades. Your handler, Agent William Hawthorne, told the priest everything before his own death in 1962. Guilt has a way of loosening tongues, doesn't it, Marcos? The name hit Marcos like a physical blow. Hawthorne had died in a car accident in Virginia. Drunk driving, the report said. Marcos had attended the funeral, stood at attention while they folded the flag. What do you want? Justice Hawthorne destroyed my life, scattered my family, and branded me a dead man. Your agency used my supposed death to destabilize Cuba, claiming they'd eliminated Fidel's most trusted advisor. They turned me into a ghost. Through his window, Marcos watched a young couple walk hand in hand toward the Domino Park. The girl reminded him of Elena at 25. Dark hair, confident stride, fearless in a way that terrified him. My daughter doesn't know about any of this, Marcos said. Elena Rodriguez, investigative journalist for the Miami Herald, winner of the Pulitzer Prize for her exposé on human trafficking. currently working on a story about CIA operations in Cuba during the 1960s. Ramon paused. She's been asking very interesting questions around Miami. Questions about a lynching that never made it into any official records. Marcus's chest tightened. Leave her out of this. She's already in it, Marcus. 3 weeks ago, she filed a FOIA request for documents related to Operation Mongoose. Last week, she interviewed Carmen Herrera, Miguel's daughter. Carmen still lives in Miami Beach, still wonders what happened to her father. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. Marcus had spent 15 years in Miami, walking the same streets as Miguel Herrera's family, never knowing. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., Coconut Grove, Ramon continued. The address is in your envelope. Come alone. We have much to discuss about the past and about your daughter's future. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the photograph again. Ramon Castro, 63 years older but very much alive, standing in the heart of the exile community that had mourned his death for decades. The community Marcus had called home since retiring from the company. Outside, a police siren wailed toward downtown Miami. Marcus checked his watch, 11:47 p.m. In 15 hours and 13 minutes, he would face the ghost of his first operation, the man whose supposed death had launched his career in the CIA's Latin American division, the man whose brother had shaped the course of American foreign policy for half a century, the man Marcus had helped create by killing the wrong revolutionary in the Cuban darkness. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Dad, need to talk. Found something big. Can you meet for breakfast tomorrow? Marcus stared at the message, his daughter's words blurring with Ramon's threats. Before you continue, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's revelation will change everything you think you know about the Cuban Revolution. Marcus didn't respond to Elena's text. Instead, he turned off his phone and walked to the small kitchenette in the back of his office, muscle memory guiding him through the motions of making Café Cubano. The ritual steadied his hands. Dark espresso, Demerara sugar whipped to a golden foam, the familiar hiss of the mocha pot on his hot plate. The coffee tasted like his childhood, like Sunday mornings in his abuela's kitchen, before the world got complicated, before he learned that governments paid young men to kill strangers in foreign countries, before he understood that some mistakes echoed across decades, claiming new victims with each reverberation. He carried the small cup back to his desk and studied the photograph again under the green banker's lamp. Ramon Castro's face held the weathered dignity of a man who had survived the unsurvivable. In the background, Marcus could make out the familiar coral stone facade of City Hall, the palm trees he passed every time he drove to Elena's apartment in the Gables. How long had Ramon been here? How many times had they shared the same air, shopped in the same markets, walked past each other on the street? Miami's exile community was tight-knit, insular. Someone should have recognized him, unless, Marcus realized, no one was looking for a dead man. The envelope also contained a USB drive, black and unmarked. Marcus hesitated before inserting it into his laptop. The file directory showed a single audio recording, Confession Domingo Ruiz, 1962.uav. He clicked play, and the voice of a young priest filled his office, speaking in accented English. Father Gonzalez has asked me to record this for the church archives. It is October 15, 1962. Agent William Hawthorne came to me today, very sick, very drunk. He says he cannot sleep. He tells me about Cuba, about a mistake his men made. They were supposed to capture Ramon Castro, Fidel's brother, but they got the wrong man, a baker named Miguel Herrera. Hawthorne says they killed this innocent man anyway, to satisfy their superiors in Washington. Marcus stopped the recording. His throat felt raw, as if he'd been screaming. The truth was that he'd tried not to think about that night in Cuba for 15 years. Whenever the memory surfaced, the rough hemp rope, the terrified man's pleas in Spanish, Hawthorne's cold orders, Marcus buried it in work, in routine, in the careful construction of a quiet life. Rodriguez Security Solutions occupied the second floor of a salmon-colored building on 8th Street, wedged between a botanica that sold Santeria supplies and a restaurant that served the best ropa vieja in Little Havana. The location was strategic. He could blend into the neighborhood's fabric, just another Cuban-American veteran making an honest living. His apartment was 6 blocks away. A modest one-bedroom where he lived with Spartan efficiency. No photographs on the walls, too many ghosts in his past, no television, too much noise. Just books, mostly history and biography, as if understanding other people's wars might help him make sense of his own. Elena was his only real connection to the world beyond work. She visited every few weeks, usually with takeout from Versailles and a lecture about his social isolation. "You're not even 65 yet, Dad," she'd say, unpacking black beans and rice. "You could date, you could travel, you could do something besides hide in this office." But Elena didn't understand that hiding was a survival skill, not a lifestyle choice. She'd grown up believing her father was a retired army officer who'd served in Central America during the 1980s. A simple lie, easier than explaining the moral complexities of covert operations, easier than watching his daughter's respect curdle into horror. Now she was investigating the very operation that had birthed his career. The cruel irony wasn't lost on him. Elena's journalistic instincts, her hunger for truth, came directly from him. He'd taught her to ask hard questions, to dig beneath surface narratives, to never accept the official story. He'd trained his daughter to destroy him. Marcus walked to his office safe, a small fireproof unit hidden behind a reproduction of Jose Marti's portrait. Inside, cash, a clean passport, a Sig Sauer P-226 he hadn't fired in 3 years, and Elena's high school graduation photo. She was 18 in the picture, cap askew, laughing at something off-camera. Her mother's smile, his eyes. He'd missed too much of Elena's childhood, deployed to places that didn't exist on official maps, conducting operations that would never appear in government records. By the time he retired and moved to Miami, she was already in college, already building the life that would make her a formidable journalist. The graduation photo was why he'd stayed clean for 15 years, why he'd chosen boring cases and predictable clients. Elena deserved a father she could respect, not a ghost haunted by other ghosts. But respect required ignorance, and ignorance was a luxury he could no longer afford. Outside his window, little Havana was finally settling into sleep. The domino players had packed up their games. The last customers were leaving the restaurant downstairs. Soon the neighborhood would belong to delivery trucks and insomniacs and old men who remembered Cuba, men like Ramon Castro, who had spent 63 years planning his return from the dead. Marcus kept vigil through the night, watching the empty streets and replaying Ramon's words until dawn painted the sky pale orange above the Miami skyline. At 6:47 a.m., his secure phone rang again. Rodriguez. His voice was rough from too much coffee and no sleep. "Marcus, it's Elena. I know you saw my text. We need to talk." The casual normalcy of his daughter's voice felt surreal after 12 hours of contemplating ghosts and confessions. "It's early, mija. I'm already at Versailles. Corner booth. And Dad?" Elena's tone shifted, taking on the edge she used when interrogating sources. "Bring whatever you're hiding about Cuba." The line went dead before he could respond. Marcus stared at the phone, a cold certainty settling in his chest. Elena wasn't asking for breakfast. She was demanding answers. The distinction meant everything had changed. He splashed water on his face in the small bathroom, studying his reflection in the cracked mirror. 62 years old, gray stubble, eyes that had seen too much. Elena had inherited his relentless curiosity, but also Sophia's unwillingness to accept comfortable lies. It made her a brilliant journalist and a dangerous daughter. The walk to Versailles took 12 minutes through streets already thick with morning humidity. The iconic restaurant buzzed with the usual crowd. Construction workers grabbing café con leche before job sites, elderly men reading Diario Las Americas, tourists photographing the mirrored walls. Marcus found Elena in the back corner, laptop open, surrounded by manila folders. She looked up as he approached, and Marcus felt a familiar stab of pride mixed with terror. Elena at 33 was formidable. Dark hair pulled back, sharp suit, the predatory focus of someone who'd spent years hunting truth in dark places. She'd won the Pulitzer for exposing human trafficking networks that stretched from Central America to Florida. Bad men feared Elena Rodriguez. "You look like hell, Dad." "Didn't sleep well." Marcus slid into the booth across from her, noting the stack of documents. His chest tightened as he recognized photocopied CIA cables, declassified reports marked with heavy black redactions. Neither did I. Elena closed her laptop and leaned forward. I spent the night reading about Operation Mongoose, specifically about a sub-operation in November 1959 that went completely off the books. An operation to eliminate Ramon Castro. Marcus reached for the coffee cup Elena had ordered for him, buying seconds to think. Elena, there are thousands of declassified documents about Cuba. Most of it is speculation, and I interviewed Carmen Herrera yesterday. Elena's words cut through his deflection like a blade. 85 years old, lives in Miami Beach. Her father Miguel disappeared in November 1959. She's been looking for him for 63 years. The cafe's noise, conversations in rapid Spanish, the hiss of the espresso machine clinking silverware seemed to fade. Marcus felt the walls of his carefully constructed life beginning to collapse. Carmen showed me something interesting, Elena continued, sliding a manila folder across the table. A letter her father sent 3 days before he disappeared. He mentioned strange men watching their house in Santiago de Cuba, men who looked American. Marcus didn't open the folder. Couldn't. Elena, you need to stop this investigation. Stop? Elena's eyebrows rose. Dad, this is the story of a lifetime. An innocent baker murdered by the CIA because he resembled Fidel Castro's brother. His family destroyed, his death covered up. Carmen Herrera deserves to know what happened to her father. Some truths are too dangerous. Since when do you believe that? Elena leaned back, studying him with the same intensity she'd once used to dissect high school math problems at his kitchen table. You taught me that truth matters more than comfort. You said that people who hide from hard facts enable evil. Marcus closed his eyes, hearing his own words thrown back at him across 30 years of conversations. Every bedtime story about brave reporters, every dinner table discussion about justice, every lecture about moral courage, all of it had led to this moment. There's something else, Elena said quietly. She pulled a photograph from another folder and placed it on the table between them. This was taken 3 days ago at a charity event in Coral Gables. Marcus opened his eyes and found himself staring at the same image Ramon had sent the night before. But Elena's copy was sharper, showing details he'd missed in the darkness of his office. In the background, partially obscured by a palm tree, stood another figure, older, distinguished, wearing an expensive suit. That's Senator Harrison Webb, Elena said, former CIA Deputy Director for Latin American Operations. He's been living in Miami since 2018. She paused, letting the implications settle. He was Hawthorne's supervisor in 1959. The photograph trembled slightly in Marcus's hands. Webb. He remembered the name from briefings, from after-action reports, from the careful bureaucratic language that had turned Miguel Herrera's murder into a classified success. Elena, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. You're in danger. Elena stared at him across the table, her coffee growing cold between her hands. What did you just say? Marcus felt the familiar weight of operational thinking taking over. Assess threats, calculate options, protect assets. But the primary asset was his daughter, and she was looking at him like he'd lost his mind. I said you're in danger. He kept his voice low, aware of the elderly Cuban men at nearby tables who might recognize certain names. This isn't some historical investigation, Elena. These people are still alive, still connected. These people? Elena's journalist instincts sharpened. Dad, you're talking like you know them personally. The accusation hung between them. Marcus watched his daughter's face change as pieces clicked into place. His evasiveness, his intimate knowledge of CIA operations, his sudden panic over her investigation. Elena had built a career reading people, and she was reading him now. You were CIA. It wasn't a question. Marcus said nothing, which was answer enough. Elena sat back in the booth, her expression cycling through betrayal, anger, and professional calculation. Around them, Versailles hummed with morning conversations, but their corner felt isolated, dangerous. How long? She asked. Elena? How long, Dad? 18 years, 1957 to 1975. She absorbed this, filing it away with the methodical precision he'd taught her. Central America in the 80s. That was your cover story. Yes. And Cuba. Marcus glanced around the restaurant, noting exits, checking faces, old habits. We can't discuss this here. Then where? Elena leaned forward, her voice urgent. Dad, if you know something about Miguel Herrera's death, about what happened to Carmen's father... Drop the story. The words came out sharper than he intended. Today. Delete your files, return the documents, tell your editor you're moving on to something else. Elena's laugh held no humor. Are you insane? This is the biggest story I've ever touched. A CIA assassination gone wrong, an innocent man murdered, his family destroyed. The cover-up alone will get you killed. The bluntness of it silenced her. Marcus watched his daughter process the threat, saw her journalistic bravado waver against parental fear. But he also saw something else, the stubborn determination that had won her awards and enemies in equal measure. Who's Harrison Webb? She asked quietly. Marcus felt the trap closing. Elena already knew about Webb, probably knew more than she was revealing. She was testing him, measuring his knowledge against her own research. A dangerous man, he said finally. Dangerous how? Elena, please, trust me on this. Trust? Her voice rose slightly, then dropped as she remembered where they were. You've been lying to me for 33 years, and now you want trust? Marcus's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Your daughter takes beautiful photographs. Coral Gables Country Club has excellent lighting this time of day. Ice flooded his veins. The message included a photo, Elena's white Honda Civic in the restaurant parking lot, taken minutes ago from across 8th Street. Someone was watching them right now. He slid the phone across the table. Elena read the message, her face paling. Who sent this? She whispered. Marcus scanned the restaurant again, looking for faces that didn't belong, tourists with too much interest in their conversation. Nothing obvious. Professional surveillance was invisible until it wanted to be seen. Someone who knows about your investigation, he said. Someone who wants us to know they're watching. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she handed back his phone. This is about Miguel Herrera. This is about things that happened before you were born. Things that were supposed to stay buried. But they didn't stay buried, did they? Elena's fear was transforming into anger, the way it always had when she was a child facing something that scared her. Someone's been carrying this secret for 63 years. Someone decided it was time to come forward. Marcus thought of Ramon Castro, alive and planning in the shadows of Miami. The meeting at Coconut Grove was still hours away, but the chess pieces were already moving. Elena had stumbled into the middle of a game she didn't understand, pursuing a truth that would destroy them both. We need to leave, he said, standing. Separately. You go first. Where? Somewhere public. The mall, the beach, somewhere with crowds. Elena gathered her files, her movements quick and professional despite the fear in her eyes. Dad, I can't just drop this story. Carmen Herrera deserves answers. Carmen Herrera has survived 85 years without those answers. You might not survive the next 24 hours with them. Elena paused at the booth's edge. Are you going to tell me the truth? Marcus looked at his daughter, brilliant, fearless, in danger because of choices he'd made before she was born. The weight of 30 years of lies pressed against his chest. Not if I can help it, he said. Elena walked away without another word, her heels clicking against the restaurant's tiled floor with mechanical precision. Marcus watched her navigate between tables, noting how she avoided the windows, how she checked reflections in the mirrored walls. He'd taught her situational awareness during her teenage years, lessons disguised as father-daughter bonding that were really tradecraft fundamentals. Now those skills might keep her alive, or get her killed faster. Marcus waited 5 minutes before following, long enough to confirm no one else left after Elena's departure. The morning heat hit him like a wall as he stepped onto 8th Street, the familiar weight of Miami humidity mixing with something heavier, the certainty that everything was accelerating beyond his control. His phone rang as he reached his car. Rodriguez Security, Marcus. The voice was weathered, careful. This is Harrison Webb. Marcus felt his world tilt. 37 years since he'd heard that voice, but it was unmistakable. the patrician Virginia accent, the measured cadence of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Senator Webb. He kept his voice neutral, professional. It's been a long time. Indeed. I believe we have mutual concerns to discuss. Your office, 1 hour. The line went dead before Marcus could respond. He stared at the phone, understanding with crystalline clarity that the game had fundamentally changed. Webb wasn't supposed to contact him directly. Protocol demanded intermediaries cut out plausible deniability. Direct contact meant desperation or declaration of war. The drive back to his office took 8 minutes through streets that suddenly felt foreign, hostile. Every pedestrian was a potential threat, every parked car a surveillance post. Marcus parked in the alley behind his building, entering through the service entrance he'd used maybe 6 times in 15 years. Webb was already waiting in his office. The man had aged well. Silver hair, perfectly groomed, tailored suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. The easy confidence of someone who'd spent decades making decisions that shaped nations. He stood by the window overlooking 8th Street, hands clasped behind his back like a general reviewing troops. "You've built quite a nice little life here," Webb said without turning around. "Quiet neighborhood business, a strange daughter who's won awards for her integrity, comfortable anonymity. Very admirable, Marcus. Very contained. What do you want, Harrison?" Webb turned, and Marcus was struck by how little the man's eyes had changed. Still ice blue, still calculating, still capable of ordering deaths over breakfast. "I want to understand why one of my former operatives is allowing his daughter to investigate Operation Seahawk." The code name hit Marcus like a physical blow. He hadn't heard it spoken aloud since his debriefing in 1960. But it brought everything back. The smell of Cuban tobacco, the weight of the rope, Miguel Herrera's terrified eyes in the darkness. "Elena doesn't know about Seahawk," Marcus said. "She knows enough." Webb moved to Marcus's desk, picking up a paperweight shaped like a miniature globe. "Carmen Herrera, Harrison Webb, CIA operations in Santiago de Cuba. She's 3 interviews away from the complete story. How do you know what Elena knows?" Webb smiled, the expression holding no warmth. "Marcus, I've been monitoring potential security breaches for this operation since 1960. Your daughter triggered multiple flags when she requested CIA documents through FOIA last month." The revelation staggered Marcus. Elena had been researching for weeks, maybe months, while he'd been living in ignorance 6 blocks away. She'd been closing in on the truth while he made small talk over Sunday dinners, completely unaware that his past was catching up to both of them. "The priest's confession," Marcus said. "You know about that too. Father Domingo Ruiz died yesterday in Kendall. Sudden heart attack. Very sad." Webb set down the paperweight with deliberate care. His apartment was burglarized shortly after. Terrible neighborhood these days. The casual admission of murder made Marcus's hands clench. Domingo was 87 years old, and very chatty in his final weeks. Apparently he'd been carrying quite a burden about that night in Cuba, felt the need to share it with interested parties. Marcus thought of the USB drive, currently hidden in his apartment safe next to Elena's graduation photo. If Webb knew about the priest's confession, he probably knew about Ramon Castro's survival too, which meant the photograph from Coral Gables hadn't been a reunion. It had been a declaration. "Ramon's alive," Marcus said. Webb's composure cracked slightly, a micro-expression of surprise quickly controlled. "That's quite an imagination you've developed in retirement. He's been planning this for 63 years. The priest's confession was just the beginning." Marcus Webb's voice carried the authority of their old operational relationship, superior to subordinate. "You're going to convince your daughter to abandon this investigation. You're going to retrieve any documents she's gathered. And you're going to ensure that Miguel Herrera remains a footnote in an obscure CIA file. And if I refuse?" Webb walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "Elena drives a white Honda Civic, license plate JMN 4457. She lives alone in apartment 3B at the Colonnade in Coral Gables. She has coffee every Tuesday morning at Books and Books, sits in the same corner table by the poetry section." The threat was delivered with bureaucratic precision, but Marcus heard the iron beneath it. Webb had spent decades orchestrating disappearances, making problems vanish into classified files and unmarked graves. "I spent 15 years believing we killed an innocent man," Marcus said quietly, "living with that guilt, that responsibility. Now I find out we killed the wrong innocent man." Webb turned back, his expression genuinely puzzled. "Marcus, we didn't kill anyone. We eliminated a security threat to ongoing operations. The fact that target identification was imprecise doesn't change the operational necessity." Miguel Herrera had 3 children. Miguel Herrera was an acceptable loss in service of larger strategic objectives. Webb opened the door. "Your daughter doesn't have to be." The door clicked shut behind Webb with the soft finality of a coffin lid. Marcus stood frozen in his office, staring at the space where his former handler had delivered threats with the casual precision of a weather report. The familiar weight of operational betrayal settled over him, but this time he was the asset being burned. His hands shook as he reached for the bottle of bourbon he kept in his desk drawer. The amber liquid burned, but it couldn't wash away the taste of 37 years of carefully constructed lies. Webb's words echoed in the silence. The fact that target identification was imprecise doesn't change the operational necessity. Imprecise. Marcus had spent 15 years in therapy, another 15 running a security firm that specialized in protecting people, all of it an elaborate penance for what he believed was his failure in Cuba. He'd convinced himself that Miguel Herrera's death was a tragic mistake, collateral damage in a legitimate operation gone wrong. The guilt had shaped every decision since 1959. From his early retirement to his choice of profession to his desperate need to keep Elena away from anything that might put her in danger. But Webb's clinical dismissal revealed the truth Marcus had been too naive to see. There had been no mistake. Miguel Herrera hadn't died because some rookie operative misidentified the target. He died because he was convenient, the right age, right build, close enough to pass for Ramon Castro in a darkened warehouse. The agency had needed a body to photograph, a corpse to justify their operational budget, proof of concept for future eliminations. They had murdered an innocent baker to maintain their credibility with the mafia contractors who would fund the real attempts on Fidel's life. Marcus opened his laptop and accessed the encrypted files he'd maintained since leaving the agency, insurance policies against a day like today, code names, operational summaries, personnel records that officially didn't exist. Everything he'd thought he'd forgotten came flooding back as he scrolled through decades of carefully archived sins. Operation Seahawk. Not a failed assassination attempt, but a successful proof of concept. Show the mob bosses that CIA operatives could deliver Cuban corpses on demand. Establish credibility for the larger operations that would follow. The poisoned cigars, the exploding seashells, the hundreds of documented attempts on Fidel's life throughout the 1960s. Miguel Herrera had been murdered to secure funding for a war that lasted 50 years. Marcus's phone buzzed. Text message from Elena, "Dad, we need to talk. I found something about Seahawk." His blood turned to ice. Elena knew the operation's code name, which meant she'd penetrated deeper into classified records than anyone should have been able to manage. Either she'd developed sources inside the intelligence community, or someone was feeding her information deliberately, someone like Ramon Castro. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The priest's confession hadn't been delivered to Marcus by accident. It was bait, designed to force him into the open. Ramon had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment to spring his trap. Elena's investigation wasn't coincidental, it was coordinated. The old revolutionary was using Marcus's daughter as leverage, knowing that a father's love would make him vulnerable in ways that professional threats never could. But there was something else, something that made Marcus's chest tighten with a different kind of fear. Webb's surprise when Marcus mentioned Ramon's survival had been genuine. The former CIA handler knew about the priest's confession, knew about Elena's investigation, but he didn't know the most important fact of all, which meant Ramon Castro was playing both sides, feeding information to Elena while remaining invisible to the agency's surveillance network. After 63 years in the shadows, the dead revolutionary was orchestrating his revenge with surgical precision. Marcus stood and walked to his office safe, withdrawing the USB drive Father Domingo had died protecting. He held the small device up to the light, understanding that it contained more than just a confession. It was a declaration of war. Ramon wasn't seeking justice for Miguel Herrera's murder. He was seeking justice for his own destroyed life, for 63 years of enforced exile, for watching his brother build a revolution without him. The meeting at Coconut Grove wasn't an invitation, it was a summoning. Ramon wanted to look into the eyes of the man who'd helped fake his death, wanted to see Marcus understand the scope of his miscalculation. Because the CIA hadn't just killed the wrong man in that Santiago warehouse. They'd created their own nemesis, a patient enemy with decades to plan and nothing left to lose. Marcus's laptop chimed with an encrypted message notification. The sender was listed Ashermano Mayer, Big Brother. Marcus, tonight you learn the difference between guilt and justice. Bring Elena. She deserves to meet the man whose story made her famous. The cursor blinked on the empty reply field. Outside his window, Miami's afternoon heat shimmered off the pavement like a mirage, distorting everything until reality became negotiable. Marcus typed back, "She's innocent." The response came immediately, so was Miguel Herrera. Marcus stared at the screen until the words blurred together. So was Miguel Herrera. 4 words that encapsulated 63 years of rage, exile, and meticulously planned revenge. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, decades of operational training warring with paternal instinct. He closed the laptop without responding. Elena deserved the truth, but the truth would kill her. Webb's threats weren't bureaucratic posturing. They were operational certainties delivered with the casual precision of a man who'd ordered executions over coffee and Danish pastries. And Ramon Castro, the ghost Marcus had helped create, was orchestrating a confrontation that would destroy everyone who'd participated in Operation Seahawk. Marcus opened his desk drawer and removed the Glock 19 he'd carried since retirement. The weight felt foreign in his hands. 15 years of running a security firm had involved more insurance claims than gunfights, but muscle memory was stubborn. His fingers automatically checked the chamber, tested the action, confirmed the magazine seated properly. How many people knew the complete truth? Webb, certainly. Probably a handful of agency officials who'd inherited the file. Carmen Herrera, who'd spent 8 decades wondering why her husband never came home. And now Ramon Castro, the man whose fake death had made it all possible. The priest's confession had been the opening move, but Elena's investigation was the real weapon. Every document she uncovered, every interview she conducted, every piece of evidence she gathered, it was all building towards something larger than individual justice. Ramon wasn't just exposing Operation Seahawk. He was destroying the entire mythology that had justified decades of covert operations in Latin America. Marcus's phone rang. Elena's number. "Where are you?" he asked without preamble. "Books and books. Dad, I need you to look at something." Her voice carried the controlled excitement of a journalist who'd found the story that would define her career. "I've been going through Father Domingo's personal effects. His niece gave me access after the funeral yesterday. Elena, we talked about this. There's a recording, audio tape from 1959. Someone confessing to murder." Marcus felt the world shift beneath his feet. The priest had made multiple copies, insurance policies scattered across Miami like landmines waiting to detonate. "Who's on the recording?" "I don't know yet. The voice is elderly, Cuban accent. But he mentions names. Harrison Webb, Operation Seahawk, someone called Marcus." The casual way she said his name told Marcus everything he needed to know. Elena hadn't made the connection yet, hadn't realized that her father was the Marcus whose voice would haunt her dreams. She was still thinking like a journalist, focused on the story rather than the personal implications. "Elena, you need to stop." "I can't stop. This is about more than Miguel Herrera now. This recording mentions other operations, other deaths. The CIA was using Cuban exiles as test subjects for assassination techniques. Dad, they were practicing on innocent people." Marcus closed his eyes, remembering other operations, other names from classified files he'd tried to forget. Elena was right. Seahawk hadn't been an isolated incident. It was part of a larger program, a systematic approach to developing elimination techniques that would later be exported to Chile, Nicaragua, El Salvador. "Where's the recording now?" he asked. "Safe." Elena's tone suggested she'd learned not to trust anyone completely, including him. "Dad, I know you worked for the agency. I've known since college when I started researching your background for a scholarship application." The admission hit Marcus like a physical blow. Elena had been carrying that knowledge for 15 years, watching him construct elaborate lies about his past, while she quietly gathered evidence of his true profession. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday conversation, every moment of seeming normalcy had been built on mutual deception. "What else do you know? I know you were stationed in Cuba during the revolution. I know you left the agency in 1960 under circumstances that are still classified. And I know that every time I've written about CIA operations in Latin America, you've found excuses to avoid those conversations." Marcus thought of Webb's threats, of Ramon Castro's patient planning, of the recording that would destroy what remained of his relationship with Elena. "Sweetheart, there are things about that time. I'm 27 years old. I've covered wars, cartels, government corruption. I can handle whatever truth you're afraid to tell me." But she couldn't handle this truth. No one could handle learning that their father had participated in the murder of an innocent man, that their entire relationship was built on a foundation of classified lies, that pursuing this story would make them both targets for elimination. Marcus checked his watch. 3 hours until the meeting at Coconut Grove. 3 hours to decide whether to protect his daughter by destroying her career or trust her with secrets that would probably get them both killed. "Elena," he said quietly, "come home. We'll talk about everything. Promise me you'll tell the truth this time." Marcus looked at the USB drive containing Father Domingo's confession, at the gun on his desk, at the encrypted message from a dead man seeking justice. "I promise," he lied. The line went dead in Marcus's hand. Elena's silence stretched across the connection like an accusation, and he knew she'd heard the lie in his voice. 42 years of operational deception had taught him to compartmentalize truth, but it had never taught him to lie convincingly to someone who shared his blood. He set the phone down and stared at his reflection in the office window. The man looking back was a stranger, gray-haired, weathered by decades of guilt, still clutching secrets that had rotted inside him like cancer. Elena deserved better. She'd always deserved better. Marcus opened his laptop and began typing a message to Ramon Castro. "I'll meet you alone. Leave my daughter out of this." The response came within seconds. "Your daughter chose her path when she started asking questions about dead Cubans. I'm simply providing answers. She doesn't know about my involvement. She will." Marcus deleted the conversation and closed the laptop. Through his window, Miami's afternoon traffic crept past in the heat haze. Tourists and exiles, criminals and cops, all of them living their lives unaware that history was about to repeat itself in the shadows of Coconut Grove. His phone buzzed again. Elena's number, but this time she'd sent a photograph. The image showed a yellowed document, stamped with CIA classifications that shouldn't have existed outside of Langley's archives. But there it was on Elena's phone screen, Operation Seahawk personnel roster, dated September 1959. His name appeared third on the list, rank and clearance level clearly visible. Below the photograph, Elena had typed a single word, "Dad?" The question mark carried the weight of their entire relationship. Marcus could see her in his mind, sitting in that corner table at Books and Books, staring at evidence that would rewrite everything she thought she knew about her father. The man who'd taught her to ride a bicycle, who'd attended every school play, who'd warned her away from dangerous stories. He was the same man whose signature authorized the murder of Miguel Herrera. Marcus holstered his gun and grabbed his keys. The meeting with Ramon Castro was still 3 hours away, but Elena wouldn't wait. She'd already connected enough pieces to understand that Marcus had been lying to her for 15 years. By tonight, she'd know everything. The drive to Coral Gables took 40 minutes through rush-hour traffic that felt like a funeral procession. Marcus parked outside Books and Books and sat in his car, watching through the windows as Elena hunched over her laptop at the corner table. Her dark hair fell across her face in concentration, and for a moment she looked exactly like her mother. The same fierce intelligence, the same stubborn pursuit of truth regardless of consequences. Maria would have known what to do. She'd always been better at navigating the impossible choices that defined their family's hidden history. But Maria had died believing that Marcus's government service involved diplomatic security, nothing more dangerous than protecting ambassadors at cocktail parties. Marcus entered the bookstore and approached Elena's table. She looked up as his shadow fell across her laptop screen, and he saw his own eyes looking back at him, the same dark brown, but without the weight of 37 years of classified guilt. "Sit down," Elena said quietly. Marcus pulled out the chair across from her. Around them, afternoon customers browsed the poetry section, completely unaware that 3 decades of carefully constructed lies were about to collapse. "You were there," Elena said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded. "I was there. Tell me what happened." The request was simple, but Marcus knew that answering would destroy everything between them. Elena would learn that her father was a killer, that every proud moment of her career had been built on blood money, that pursuing this story would make her a target for elimination. But she was right. She deserved the truth. "September 15th, 1959, Marcus began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Warehouse District in Santiago de Cuba. We were supposed to eliminate Ramon Castro, Fidel's older brother. The operation was funded by organized crime figures who wanted to demonstrate CIA capabilities." Elena's fingers hovered over her laptop keyboard, journalist instincts warring with daughter's shock. "We had bad intelligence. Wrong location, wrong target. The man we found in that warehouse wasn't Ramon Castro." Marcus met her eyes. His name was Miguel Herrera. He was 43 years old. He had a wife named Carmen and 3 children. "You killed him. Harrison Webb killed him. I watched." Elena's face went pale. The recording mentions Webb and someone named Marcus who helped stage the scene. Marcus reached across the table and gently closed her laptop. "Elena, there are people who will kill you to keep this story buried. We need to leave, now." But Elena wasn't listening. She was staring past his shoulder toward the bookstore entrance, where a figure had just appeared in the doorway, an elderly Cuban man with silver hair and dark eyes that held 63 years of patient rage. Ramon Castro had found them. The 3 of them sat in Marcus's living room like survivors of a war that had ended before Elena was born. Ramon Castro occupied the leather chair by the window, his weathered hands folded over a manila envelope that contained 64 years of carefully preserved evidence. Elena sat cross-legged on the couch, her laptop balanced on her knees, recording everything. Marcus remained standing, unable to settle, watching the 2 people who would define whatever years he had left. "The priest kept better records than the CIA," Ramon was saying, his accent still thick despite decades in Miami's shadows. "Every operation, every target, every innocent man killed to maintain operational credibility. Father Domingo understood that confession without documentation is just whispered guilt." Elena's fingers moved across her keyboard with mechanical precision, but Marcus could see the shock in her posture, the way she held herself like someone learning to breathe underwater. 3 hours earlier, she'd been an ambitious journalist chasing a story about government corruption. Now, she sat in her childhood home, interviewing the walking ghost of her father's greatest crime. "Miguel Herrera wasn't random," Ramon continued. "Webb chose him specifically because he matched my general description: age, height, build. The baker made the mistake of staying late to finish an order for a wedding celebration. Wrong place, wrong night, right face for a photograph that would fool organized crime bosses in New York." Marcus thought of Carmen Herrera, 93 years old and still attending daily mass, still lighting candles for a husband who'd never come home from work. "She still doesn't know," he said quietly. "She knows her husband disappeared on September 15th, 1959. She knows the police told her nothing. She knows she raised 3 children alone because Miguel chose to work late that evening." Ramon's dark eyes found Marcus across the room. "Knowledge and truth are different weapons, Colonel. Carmen Herrera has lived with knowledge for 64 years. Tonight she learns the truth." Elena looked up from her laptop. "You're going public with this." "We're going public with this." Ramon opened the manila envelope and removed a stack of documents. "Your father spent 37 years protecting secrets that were never worth protecting. You spent 15 years building a reputation that can survive one honest story. I spent 64 years gathering evidence that can destroy the mythology of American righteousness in Latin America. The documents were photocopies of CIA cables, operational summaries, financial records that traced funding from organized crime figures to black budget accounts. Marcus recognized some of the file names, operations he'd helped execute, people he'd helped eliminate, governments he'd helped destabilize. "This goes beyond Seahawk," Elena said, scanning the papers. "Seahawk was practice," Ramon replied. "The real program began in Chile, continued through Nicaragua, expanded to El Salvador. Your government spent 40 years perfecting elimination techniques on Cuban exiles who thought they were fighting for freedom." Marcus sat down heavily in his desk chair. "How many people have to die for this story?" "How many people died for your silence?" Ramon countered. "Miguel Herrera, Father Domingo, 3 of Webb's former colleagues who tried to break operational security over the years. Probably others we'll never identify." Elena closed her laptop. "What do you want from us?" Ramon smiled for the first time since entering their lives. "I want your father to sleep peacefully for whatever years he has remaining. I want you to win the journalism awards that this story will generate. And I want Carmen Herrera to understand that her husband was murdered by men who betrayed the country he'd taught his children to love." The old revolutionary stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Miami skyline where Latin American exiles had built new lives from the ruins of their homeland dreams. "There's something else. Webb is dead." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "When?" "This morning. Natural causes, the police report will say. Heart attack in his Georgetown apartment." Ramon turned from the window. Of course, men Webb's age often experience cardiac stress when confronted with evidence of their war crimes. Elena stared at her phone, probably already researching Webb's death, building the timeline that would frame her story. Marcus watched his daughter work and realized he was seeing her clearly for the first time in years, not as the child he'd failed to protect, but as the woman who would carry their family's truth into whatever future they'd managed to secure. "There's one condition," Marcus said. "Elena publishes under a joint byline. My name appears with hers." Ramon nodded slowly. "The murderer confessing alongside the chronicler. There's poetry in that arrangement." Outside, Miami's evening light painted everything the color of faded photographs. Marcus thought of Miguel Herrera, working late to finish wedding pastries he'd never complete. Of Father Domingo, dying to protect a confession that would outlive them all. Of Elena, inheriting a story that would define her career and destroy her innocence. But mostly he thought of sleep, the deep, dreamless rest he hadn't experienced since September 15, 1959. When he'd watched an innocent man die and spent the next 64 years pretending it mattered who pulled the trigger. Some stories, Marcus realized, choose their own endings.